You're listening to the Cheryl Lacey Show, where curiosity meets courage, and I'm so glad you're here. Joining us right now is our resident US correspondent, Lawrence Rojak, and we have got one cracker conversation coming up. There is a lot happening in the United States, a lot affecting the world at large, and one of the biggest issues affecting all of us, whether we realise it or not, is the socialism that is rampant throughout the world, quite often with very little understanding of what that is and its impact. Lawrence, welcome to the show.
Hello, and hello, Australia.
Lawrence, what is socialism?
Nobody dares to define it. If you ask the people who are in favor of it to define it, they can't do so in terms that could provide a sketch artist with a way to draw an accurate picture of it. Socialism is one of those generalized terms that creates the impression of something that's nice. But in actual practice, of course, it's total government control and economic collapse because it doesn't work. What is socialism? It's supposed to be, allegedly, it's supposed to be a system in which everybody gets a fair share of the pie. But in reality, it's where the government owns the pie and they shed a few crumbs of it for the people, only for the people who support the government.
That's a big call, isn't it? My understanding as well is that it really got traction with the Industrial Revolution, and to overcome some of the working conditions of people working in factories, hence the correlation between the school system and what they call the factory model. And with that, there was a misunderstanding that if the worker was at the top of the wazza and the employer was doing essentially as they had to do to protect the workers, all would be well. But as you've said, that has been sort of outlawed. If that was an ideal world, which we know wouldn't happen anyway, it's been overtaken by these governments who are spending money that's not theirs anyway. So I get confused as to how anybody could think socialism could work just from that context, because they're taking your money to give you crumbs back.
In a way, it's like the fashion in which some people have corrupted certain religions. Every religion in the world allegedly preaches peace and love and equality and doing, helping the poor and blah, blah, blah. But in every religion, some more than others, you have fanatical sects where certain manipulative leaders have put their own interpretation on the religion to mean that the leaders of that particular sect have total power, and that their followers should use violence to not only subjugate people who are not part of that religion, but also within the religion to crush any opposition. So one might say charitably that socialism is a good idea, which has always been monopolized by bad people who use it for personal gain and to hurt others.
And interestingly, it's never worked. So this personal gain takes precedent, and around the world we still have a number of leaders that are considered to be socialists, but there are many bordering on communism. So what is the difference between socialism and communism? I've heard the only difference is a gun.
Okay. Well, certain communist leaders, like Stalin, who you would think is an expert on socialism and communism, have said that socialism is merely the economic policy of a communist nation. Karl Marx said that socialism is the first step towards communism. The two of them are interrelated, and a number of socialist philosophers and writers have said that the one is merely the introduction to the other, or that one is the economic arm of the other, or that socialism is the first step that leads to communism. But the two of them are closely intertwined, and there really is no difference. I mean, if you take a look at Cuba, Cuba has a socialist economy, but officially the political philosophy of Cuba is communism. The same was true of Russia until the Soviet Union fell in 1989, and it was true of communist China until the leaders got smart and adopted capitalism as their economic theory. China is very interesting because officially they are a communist nation, and they restrict personal rights in the same way as every communist nation does, but very wisely they adopted a capitalist economy to the benefit of both the government and many of the people. It was a smart move on the part of that government after having so many hundreds of millions of Chinese people die from starvation and poverty. But to get back to your question, socialism and communism are just two sides of the same coin.
You've mentioned Cuba and China, and it couldn't be more pertinent with what's going on at the moment. My understanding is that Cuba is suffering major problems with fuel, and the oil blockade that President Trump has ensured is occurring in Cuba is having international ramifications. Air Canada has stopped their flights. China has popped in. The foreign ministry has said they're going to support Cuba among this with this fuel shortage. What is President Trump's goal here?
Although he hasn't said so explicitly, I believe that his goal is to make the communist regime collapse and hopefully be replaced with a representative form of government, whether that's democracy or a constitutional republic. Cuba's interesting in that it has been a welfare state since 1959, when Fidel Castro's revolution overthrew the military regime of Fulgencio Batista. Cuba only existed, or was able to exist, because of massive economic help from the Soviet Union. When that help ended, or pretty much ended, in 1989, Cuba has turned to its allies, in particular China and North Korea, to keep it afloat. But the Cuban people have been suffering greatly. Cuba, you've got an enormously talented population there who would like nothing better than a free enterprise system, so that they could put their energy and their talent to work for them. And they've been poor and hungry because the regime hangs on to the communist political philosophy and socialist economic philosophy for its own benefit. They keep the people subjugated so that the regime can stay in power. And I think that what President Trump is doing is putting the squeeze on the regime so that it collapses by one means or another. Hopefully the Cuban people themselves will overthrow their government. And I certainly hope that President Trump is able to put the squeeze on it, so that happens for the benefit of the Cuban people. A free Cuba would be what a wonderful thing. Cuba, if free, if it had a government like the United States or any other free country, would become an economic powerhouse, as indeed it was prior to the communist revolution. The people there had the ability, the talent, the resources to make Cuba wealthy. And I think that'll happen as soon as the communist government collapses.
Well, you're talking a large population too on a very small parcel of land, 11 million people. And with these power outages and all sorts of issues, surely there will be that groundswell, or one would hope so, particularly if once they realise they do have that support. And Venezuela is also comes into play here, doesn't it, because of what happened there recently. Do you think Cuban leaders are frightened, or they still think they're in control with China's support and the support of other nations?
I think they're very frightened. They're not stupid. They have to know that the walls are closing in on them, and that usually leads to even greater repression until finally there's an explosion. I see that happening in Iran. I see it happening in Cuba. When I say I see it happening, when I say what I mean is I see it coming. It would be such a game changer if President Trump could preside over the collapse of the Iranian regime, the Cuban regime. Who knows? Maybe even the North Korean regime. Although that country is so isolated, it would be a lot harder. But certainly Cuba and Iran would be enormous blows for freedom if President Trump can engineer their collapse.
Indeed.
Let me add something else. When I debate with people about Cuba, the people who are in favor of the communist regime say, well, the only reason that Cuba is suffering so much is because the United States has had an embargo on it for 60 years. And my response to that is, if socialism works, why would they have to be dependent on the United States for support? It should be the other way around. The mere fact that they are dependent on a capitalist country for sustenance means that their system doesn't work.
That's pretty logical, isn't it? Yeah, indeed. Lawrence, don't go away. Stay on the line. I'm just going to take a quick short break and we'll be back with you because I want to go locally with socialism, particularly with the dreadful weather and what's happening with homeless in places like New York and some of those other colder states. So stay there. Don't go away. We'll be back in just a moment.
Good morning to you from the studios of 88.9 Win FM.
You're listening to 88.9 Win FM, the Cheryl Lacey Show, where curiosity meets courage. And our guest is Lawrence Rojak, our US correspondent. We're discussing socialism. We've been talking about Cuba and some of the other nations that, be it socialist, communist, or a combination of the two. And we're now just going to tap into a little bit of local US issues regarding socialism and what's happening with US people. New York is one of those ones, isn't it, Lawrence, where the weather is dreadful and homelessness is such an issue. There are a number of people dying, and Mamdani doesn't seem to care too much.
Well, Mayor Mamdani is proving that socialism doesn't work in a record short period of time. The number one thing to remember about Mayor Mamdani is that the man has never had a job in his life, and that's true. His parents are rich. He grew up as a spoiled rich boy, never had a job, and yet because he champions socialism, which is a system that he never lived under, there are enough people in New York City who are equally ignorant about economics and politics, who believe that he would bring about some of the impossible promises that he made. Free buses, free health care, free this, free that. And the promises of a socialist politician work exactly the way the cheese in a mousetrap works. The smart rats know better, and they don't nibble at the cheese. The ones who do, well, they think, hey, free cheese, and then their neck gets snapped. This is happening in a record period of time. I'm surprised it's happening so fast, because you would think that the employees at the sanitation department who are responsible for removing the snow and the garbage would still know how to do that, but apparently Mayor Mamdani has managed to derail the system in record time, and I can't feel sorry for New Yorkers the way I don't feel sorry for anybody who makes stupid decisions and suffers the consequences. The only question is, how far will New York City fall and how fast? I think it's going to fall pretty far and pretty fast, but he's in there for a 4-year term, and there's no way to get him out of it. So
it's fascinating, isn't it, when you've got the US president resident in New York, business developments in New York, a socialist regime in New York, far from the president's value system, and yet he continued to live there as it's such an extraordinary city. How do you balance it when you are trapped, I suppose, to use that word, trapped in a system like that is so against your own values, and you can see this demise all around you? How do you manage?
For the past few years, I would say since the COVID lockdown, wealthy New Yorkers have been leaving the city at a record pace. And they are mostly relocating to Florida, where I spend most of my time. They're also going to other conservative so-called red states like Texas. And I think that as the systems in New York City become more and more unworkable, and as the quality of life keeps deteriorating, I think that emigration from New York is going to accelerate to the point where most of the people left in New York are poor and dependent, and it basically becomes a third world type of city.
So do you see the financial hub relocating as well, Wall Street?
I think so. In fact, it's already happening. The interesting thing about financial firms is that it's so easy for them to move because all they're doing is sitting at computers, moving money around, and taking a commission from it. And just like a remote job, you can do that from anywhere. So Why should they do it in New York City, where the quality of life is going down the drain and where corporate taxes are scheduled or promised by Mendami to keep going up? Why should they stay there when they can move and keep more of their own money and provide a better lifestyle for their employees? I foresee the big financial firms moving. They've already got, what they call their back office operations. Most of them already have their back office operations in other states, and I just see that continuing. It's a shame, but I think it's something that has to happen in order to turn this thing around to the point where, when the next election comes around, somebody with some business sense will be elected.
Indeed, we're talking, 25 years since Giuliani was the mayor there and made such a difference to the city, and now we've got the reverse in just a short period of time. Lawrence, wonderful to have you on the show again. It's always a pleasure to learn from you, and I know our listeners do appreciate your integrity in the way you explain what's happening in the United States for all of us listeners. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to your company again next week.
Thank you. See you then.
Okay, thanks. Bye. Lawrence Rogak, our US correspondent, discussing socialism around the world and also a little bit there locally. You're on 88.9 Win FM, the Cheryl Lacey Show, where curiosity meets courage.